Welcome to all of you to this lecture. This represents a lifetime of work that I have spent in trying to understand the fundamental problems which are facing the Ummah and how we can solve them. So let me start this screen share with the. ये कैसे करूं आप जो है
Start होगी डॉक्टर साहब, if you can just
अच्छा
maximize it.
All right, so I'll just do a slideshow, right? Okay. All right, so let's see, this could be minimized. All right, so although we are talking about the book, but we're actually talking about more than the book, the context for the book, the reasons why it was written and why it matters and what it can help us to do today. So basically the book is in the context of the message of Iqbal, Hali, and many other Muslim thinkers who were concerned about the condition of the Ummah. And in a sense, this is a great mystery because the Islamic civilization was a thing of beauty. For 1,000 years, it had achievements which are unparalleled even today. It aspired to the highest ideals: brotherhood, equality, love and respect, courage, sacrifice, justice, compassion. And these ideals, which were dominant in the Islamic situation, actually influenced all of the humanity. Other civilizations were influenced by it, and this is something that is documented by the book. But today, we find that the Muslims are living in darkness and ignorance, not very different from the pre-Islamic conditions. So the issue is, why is this the case? So the central question, it's good to formulate it as this, that Allah Ta'ala has revealed His final message, and it is complete and perfect. And this message, the power of this message was revealed in history because it launched a revolution. It took the mankind out of darkness, and it brought light to the world for 1,000 years. But today, once again, the world is wrapped in darkness and ignorance all over the place. So the question is that, does this message have the same power today that it did 14 centuries ago? If we say yes, then we are faced with a large number of problems. If the message has the same power today, then why are Muslims backwards and ignorant? Presumably, we have this message with us. So there is this question. And suppose that this message is perfect and complete, then how did the Europeans rise to the mastery of the world and they came to dominate the globe? They don't have the benefit of this message. And the third question is that today Muslims all over the world believe that if we want to progress, we have to acquire the knowledge of the West. Today, our children are learning what the West has acquired in terms of knowledge over the past 3 centuries. And this is said to be the solution to our problems by everybody, from top to bottom, from religious people to secular-minded people. Nobody thinks that the Quran contains the solution to our problems today. So in this question, in these three questions, there are thousands of other questions, and I will not be able to deal with all of them. That's why we have 8 lectures, and even at 8 lectures, I will not be able to touch many of the questions which will arise on the basis of these ideas. So the first and very simple question is that some people even doubt that Islam actually launched a revolution. There are lots of people who say that yes, the message was powerful, but very soon after the Prophet ﷺ passed away, the teaching of Islam was lost. The Khilafah lasted for 30 years, and basically, Khilafah is the heart of Islam, according to some, and therefore, Islam ended 30 years after the passing of the Prophet. And there are many other doubters and skeptics who think that maybe Islam didn't really bring a revolution to the world. So one of the purpose of this book is to show that yes, indeed, Islam did bring a revolution in history, and that Islam brought great benefits not just to Muslims, but to all of humanity. And that these benefits caused great advances in human civilization, not just the Islamic civilization. And then also to show that the decline of Islam also caused great losses to the whole world. All of humanity is suffering because of the decline of Islam. So these are very big claims. And obviously, we will not be able to cover them in this lecture. We can't even cover the whole book. But we will just make an outline of some of the main points that we need to understand to prove this. So this is just one aspect of the question, that is, did actually Islam bring a revolution? There are many other aspects which we will not touch in this lecture, which we will be discussing in later lectures. All right, so coming to the present time, our faith requires the belief in the unseen. So the Surah Baqarah says that Allazina yu'minuna bil ghaib. This is the characteristic of the believers. And as opposed to this, one of the characteristics of modern Western thought is to believe in the seen, what is observable, what is empirical, what can be measured, what can be counted. This is what matters. What cannot be seen, what cannot be measured, the unobservables, these are not important according to the dominant Western philosophy. Even more difficult is the problem that Allahu waliyul ladhina amanu yukhrijuhum min adh-dhulumati ila an-nur. So according to this ayah, those people who have the faith, they will be in the light, and those who don't have the faith, they will be in the darkness. So our heart and our faith tells us to believe in this, but our eyes show the exact opposite. We see that the leaders in the frontiers of knowledge is the West. They are the ones who are developing the vaccines, and they are the ones who have the science and technology. And those who believe are wrapped in darkness and ignorance. So this creates a severe test of faith for us. How can we reconcile what our eyes see with what our heart believes? So just the first few steps of which are posed as the solution to the questions are that there are prophecies in the hadith that Islam came as a stranger and will become a stranger, and that the Muslims will follow the ways of the Jews and the Christians, even crawling into snake holes after them. And nothing will remain of Islam except its name, and nothing will remain of the Quran except its writing. And that the enemies will gather over the Muslims like diners gather over the feast. So all of these are prophecies that of the decline of Islam, which we are living through today. That all of these prophecies have come true in certain sense, which must be understood clearly. Why? So anyway, this is the reason. So one of the questions that we pose is that if Muslims have Islam, how come it is not giving us the light, the leadership, and all of the promises of the great message? That is because the message itself has become a stranger to us. So very specific questions for this lecture is that what was special, significant, revolutionary about the message of Islam? We have this message today, but is it that we should be regular in our salat? Is it that we should capture the Khilafah as some people think? Is it that we need to do jihad? Is it that Dawa ilal Islam is the heart of Islam and we have left it, and that is why we are in trouble? So there are many different jamaats, many different groups of Muslims who are working on many different solutions. So there is no clear understanding of what is it in the message that can cause a revolution. And then after identifying the source, then we have to look at the mechanism. How did this knowledge launch a revolution? Allah Ta'ala mentions that Allam al-insana ma lam ya'lam. Almost at the beginning of the Wahi, he said that I am going to give mankind a knowledge of things that they do not know. So what was the nature of this knowledge? How did it change lives? And how did it create a revolution and affect all of humanity? And what were the adverse effects of the decline of Islam? These are the questions which are discussed in Sayyid Abul Hasan Ali Nadwi's book. So, the revolutionary message of Islam, the Quran itself says that, say in the bounty of Allah and in His mercy, that is Islam and the Quran, let them rejoice. That is better, that is the Quran and the deen that we have been given is better than anything that anybody else can gather. So, according to Allah Ta'ala, this message that we have, the knowledge that has been given to us in the Quran, is better than all of the knowledge that has been gathered by the West over the past 3 centuries. But we don't have any proof of this. We don't have any dalil. This is just faith, and a dawa without a dalil, a claim without a dalil is just actually harmful. It causes us harm. So some of the key message of the Islam have to do with social, political, economic affairs. And this is where the weakness of the West lies. It's not in the science and technology area, but it is how to live, how to behave towards others, how to have strong families, something which the West has lost, how to develop communities, how to develop a sense of the ummah of all mankind. All of these things, if you look at the number of wars, the break of families, the loss of community, all of these things have been lost in the West. So the message of Sayyid Abul Hasan Nadwi, which is basically documenting the rise of Islam and the change that it caused in humanity, is documented and supported by many other sources, which I will briefly mention. So one of them is a book by Marshall Hodgson called The Venture of Islam, in which he says that Islam brought a revolution to the world and it united mankind on the highest possible ideals known to man. And the book, there is another book by another historian called The 100, which lists Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam as the most influential man in all of history. His message had the maximum impact in history of all of mankind. This is testimony of a non-Muslim, a non-Christian. And there are hundreds of books on the influence of Islam on world civilization. And if we think that about Europe and how they got started, then although this message is concealed in the histories, the truth is it's easy to see that Europe was in darkness, the Middle Ages, the Dark Ages, and the light which changed these Dark Ages into light was lit by Islam, in particular the conquest of Islamic Spain by the reconquest of Islamic Spain by Christians gave them access to millions of books in Islamic libraries, and that is actually what launched the Enlightenment. So even the light in the Europe is a consequence of the light of the Quran. And there are specific books like the Enlightenment Quran, which shows how the Enlightenment thinkers who brought the light to Europe were influenced by the Quran. And also there is this book called Jefferson's Quran, which shows how the American Revolution and the ideals of the Americans, which are written in their constitution, were influenced by the reading of the Quran, which Jefferson had access to. So the message of Sayyid Abul Hasan al-Nadwi for the Ummah is that we should study the revolution of Islam and learn how to launch it again. And this is the same as the message of Iqbal, Hali, and other great reformers and leaders throughout the Islamic world. So now I'm going to summarize the book. A more detailed summary is available, and also copies of the book in Arabic and English and in Urdu are available from this link, which I am showing on the screen here. And so there are 8 chapters in this book. The first chapter describes human history in the pre-Islamic world, and it shows how everywhere there was darkness. The second chapter discusses the advent of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the impact that the message of the Quran had on the hearts of the people and on the external society. So both an internal revolution within the hearts of the people and an external revolution in society, culture, history. The third chapter describes the era of Muslim ascendance, in which the Muslims rose from the bottom ranks of civilization to become world leaders in every field of knowledge. The fourth chapter describes the decline of the Islamic civilization and discusses some of the reasons for this. The fifth chapter discusses the rise of the Western civilization and how this has been of great harm to all of mankind. And the sixth chapter discusses how the ideas of the West, which are actually very harmful, have spread throughout the world and are causing enormous amount of damage to humanity. The seventh chapter deals with is a call to action. It tells us about what we can do to revive the message of Islam. And the eighth chapter of the book is a special appeal to Arabs to take up their historic mission. So this is just a summary of the 8 chapters of the book. So I'm just going to go over these chapters very briefly. So the first chapter deals with the darkness and ignorance of the pre-Islamic world. And so it describes the conditions of mankind in Rome, in Persia, in China, in India. And basically what it is describing is lost humankind. I mean, people were living for the sake of living only. They had an existence just like animals had an existence. The religions and the philosophies which were capable of giving man a higher vision, that we are not just animals, we live for higher purposes. We have big dreams for the future. We are concerned about all of mankind. We are connected to the past history, starting from Adam alayhi salam, and we have a great mission for the future. All of these big ideas, they were lost. And so what's the purpose of life? It is to eat, drink, and to be merry. And this is just the same as the animals. And so in this world, the law of the jungle prevailed, where the powerful use their power to exploit the poor and the weak. And the only purpose of life was to enjoy, to have pleasure, to have luxury. And so these things this was the state of the world before the coming of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Then when Islam came to the world, some of the key messages of Islam were that this world is a temporary place. It is a testing place. It is to see who will do good and who will do bad. And Allah Ta'ala has put us here to see لِيَبْلُوَكُمْ أَيُّكُمْ أَحْسَنُ عَمَلًا, to see who can do the best of deeds. So our job is to try to show excellence in behavior on the pattern of our Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who was the most excellent in behavior. And there is a God who is watching all over us, and he is all powerful, and he is compassionate, and he loves us, Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim. And there was a great emphasis on building character, that we should have respect for others. We should live our lives with dignity. We should have compassion for all of mankind. The Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was rahmatul lil alameen. So our hearts should be full of love and mercy for all of mankind, and humility, because Allah Ta'ala is great and no one else can claim to any greatness. Some of the revolutionary message of the Islam was that we are all brothers and sisters, all human beings are sons and daughters of Adam and Eve. This message was nowhere available in any of the mankind, and all of the nations, including the Arabs, thought that their nation was the most superior and everybody else was inferior. But Islam taught us that no, that these differences are just for the sake of recognition of each other. They are not so that we can take pride in them. Also, Islam brought the revolutionary message that Allah Ta'ala gives power not so that the powerful can exploit the weak, but that the powerful can defend the weak and protect them. And wealth was given not so that you can enjoy luxury, but so that you can share it and give it to the poor. And Islam puts great emphasis on using your wealth in the path of Allah. And we have a great mission. Our mission is that all over the world there are poor, there are Muslim, there are people who are suffering from injustice. So our job as human beings is to do the best we can to remove the poverty, the hunger, the injustice, and to fight with all our lives and all our hearts to create justice, and to work for the feeding of the poor, and to work for the ending of wars, and to bringing peace to all of humanity. So this is a great mission, and all of us, every single human being has been given this mission. We are not here to eat, drink, and to be merry. So this was the great message of Islam, and revolutionary message, which is still desperately needed today. So in the era of Muslim dominance, this message penetrated the hearts of all the people. Today, if you, from top to bottom, the poor people, the masses, the rich people, everybody understood that we are not animals. We are not here for eat, drink, and be merry, and that we have big tasks to do. And Allah Ta'ala has given us these tasks, and we have only a short time to do this. And we have to show Allah Ta'ala our best deeds, and then we will be in Yawm al-Qiyamah in front of Him. So because Muslims had the guidance from Allah, we were not trapped by these complex philosophies which today are deluding mankind. There's so much tangle that it takes a lifetime to study the wrong philosophies that have emerged and darkened the planet. And Prophet ﷺ was Rahmatul lil Alameen, and this was his message to us, that we should have love, tolerance, and compassion for all. And Islam built very strong family relationships, and the hadith put so much emphasis on taking care of the neighbor and of building strong communities. The Quran tells us about how the love was put into the hearts of the mu'min, and this is a treasure that is more precious than all of the gold in this planet. So these are the things worth striving for. And in addition to these ideals, we were given practical methods to achieve these. The masjid was created to bring the community together. The Jum'ah Namaz was to bring the whole neighborhood together. The institution of Eidain was to bring much larger groups. And then Eid al-Adha and Hajj was for bringing all of the Ummah together. And we were given the Waqf, which was the use of money to help the others. And we were given institutions which replace, like Musharka, which replace interest today, which is an extremely harmful institution. So all of these things were there, and they led to an era in which no one was hungry, because you can knock at any door and get a meal. And no one who wanted to get an education was denied this, because it was the responsibility of the society to educate all the children. But the message of Islam gradually got lost. And the central pillars which led to the rise of Islam were Jihad and Ijtihad. Jihad was the struggle to implement the deen in our lives and on the planet. And Ijtihad was the struggle to find the ways of interpreting the spirit of Islam in light of modern conditions. So every day the condition is changing, the message of Allah Ta'ala is the same, but every day we must search for how we can implement this ancient message in the modern times. And every day this way to implement it changes. So the gradual abandonment of efforts in these fundamental directions took place. People got lazy and said that, okay, what our ancestor did was enough, both in the line of jihad, we don't need to do it anymore because they already did it for us. So there are three dimensions: intellectual, the head; spiritual, the ruh; and the practical, the body. So in all of these dimensions, we need to make jihad and we need to make ijtihad. But instead of doing this, instead of fighting the great war against the complex and sophisticated philosophies which are today dominating the world, we lost the battle on the intellectual grounds. And today, very sad to say that our intellectual leaders are not able to, for the most part, compete with Western philosophers. It's not that our message is much stronger, but with the exception, few exceptions, people don't know how to show, how to prove the superiority of the message of Islam to all of the philosophies which are currently being taught in Harvard and other leading universities. So the losses on the intellectual front, they are very important, but there were also losses in the physical fronts. We lost wars and we were colonized, and there was the destruction of libraries. This is much more important than we realize. Today we live in an age of information. So, but in the olden days, a book was written by hand, and if it was destroyed, then all of the knowledge in it was lost. It could not be recovered. So when libraries of Baghdad were burned and the libraries of Spain were conquered, there was a huge loss in some way the hard disk of the civilization was lost. So all of these were causes of the decline of Islam. With the decline of Islam came the rise of the West, and the rise of the West was very directly sparked by their acquisition of the knowledge of the books of Islam. And they started studying these books which they acquired in the 16th century European. The language in Europe was Arabic. And gradually they translated these things to Latin and eventually to their language, and they forgot the Islamic origins. And they developed new ideas and new ways of thinking. One was Machiavelli. He was a very important thinker who said that politics is all about power and there is no morality, no ethics. You can do whatever is needed. You should lie to the people. You should be cruel. You should be heartless. You should do whatever it takes to get power. So this lesson was absorbed very deeply by the West, that all is fair in love and war. You can, for the pursuit of pleasure and for the pursuit of power, you can do whatever you know. There are no ethics, no morals. The philosophy of nationalism was developed, which allowed people to kill for the sake of their nation. About this, Iqbal has said that in the fresh gods which have been minted by mankind, nationalism is the greatest one, and the dress it wears is the coffin of religion. So nationalism, the idea that we should be able to die for the sake of our nation, this is a new god which has divided Muslims against themselves. And then there's the god of materialism, the worship of wealth and material pleasures. And there were many dualisms which came into place: the divide between the spirit and the flesh, between the heart and the mind, between the ruh and the body. All of these things all of these things are part of Western philosophy, and they have caused tremendous damage in ways of thinking. So, with the rise of the West and with the decline of Islam, there was a decline of morality all over, which has been documented in many ways. The mankind gradually lost sense of higher visions and goals, sense of history. There was the rise of individualism. Today, people think that life is all about me. I am. I should just pursue my pleasure. I should do whatever it takes. I should seize the day. I should not be concerned about others. I should not be concerned about anything which gets in the path of me and my obtaining pleasure. So this led to a loss of spirituality, led to a loss of mission, a sense of higher purpose. We live just like, again, the pre-Islamic era, just like animals. More in terms of capitalism and materialism, there came the idea that human beings are also objects for sale and purchase. So economic teaches us about the labor market, where our lives are for sale and purchase. And today, Muslim youth also think they are educated to believe that they are for sale in the labor market, and they are happy if somebody buys them for a high wage. And again, capitalist structures put into place institutional structures like interest, which ensure that wealth accumulates in the hands of the rich and the poor become more and more hungry and powerless. Furthermore, these harmful ideas were spread throughout the world by global conquest. The Europe conquered the world for reasons which are very different from what they tell us. And this colonization, very few people understand that colonization is not created by guns and by power. The place where colonization takes place is in the minds first. A few Europeans could not govern millions of people unless the million people's assent, they agree to being governed. And why do they agree? Because they are taught that the Europeans are superior, that they are more courageous, that they are more honest, that they are brighter, they have science, and we are ignorant and backwards and superstitious. So this teaching colonizes our minds, and there are many aspects of this which are covered in many books. Like, we have forgotten our shining history, and Muslims nowadays don't think that Islamic civilization did anything very spectacular, because we simply don't know what Islamic civilization did. And there is also the theft of history. A lot of accomplishments of Muslim scientists have been stolen and have been given to Europeans. That, for example, Copernicus launched the revolution of teaching us about the planetary orbiting the sun. Whereas, in fact, Copernicus was just a translator. He copied a book of Ibn Shatir, which he had on his desk. So, but everybody now thinks that. And similarly, many other revolutionaries borrowed ideas. When Newton said that I have been able to see this far because I stand on the shoulder of giants, what we don't understand is that those giants were all Muslims that he was building up his theories upon. And today we have come to believe the Eurocentric worldview. According to the Eurocentric worldview, which we have all been trained into believing, the sun of reason first shone in Europe in the 16th century. All mankind was in ignorance and darkness, and Europeans learned to reason and to have science and technology and all the great things in 16th century. So, and nothing happened before 16th century. So this is
Uh,
very, yes.
Doctor, there was a complaint. I think some people cannot see the slides. Uh, can you see the slides?
Yes, I can see them.
Okay. Uh,
And it says,
Can
your
some of
screen
the
sharing.
participants tell? If they can, you can message us. Yes, they can see. I think it was the problem with someone. Everyone can
Good.
see.
Okay.
So
Okay.
yeah.
So, so there are these two conflicting views. We have been trained into thinking by our education that everything good that mankind knows today was invented in the West. On the other hand, Islam teaches us that everything good that is known to mankind today was brought in the complete and perfect message 14 centuries ago. So these two are in direct conflict with each other. And the empirical evidence, what our eyes show us, is that the West is right and the Islamic claim is wrong. So again, this is a problem that we need to resolve, and I hope to resolve in these lectures. So we come to the seventh chapter, that Islam created a revolution 14 centuries ago. How can we replicate it today? So basically, it's that the revolution takes place in several fronts, and that's why it's not so easy to do. It's not one thing that you can do. You have to take steps in terms of the spiritual steps, the intellectual steps, the social steps. So we have to bring a spiritual revolution, cleanse our hearts of the false idols, strengthen our faith in Iman. We have to build strong families and communities. We have to reject the hedonism and individualism message, which is very strongly being pushed upon us by all sorts of social media. We have to do self-sacrifice, go against individualism in order to build community, family, take responsibility for the weak. We are not here to pursue pleasure. Instead of taking the most expensive meal at the restaurant, we should be looking out for the hungry in our neighborhood and feeding them. We should create material self-sufficiency. We should not need to borrow or buy or get imports from the West in order to live. And we have our own political system, we have our own economic systems, but these have again been forgotten. So we have to rediscover them and implement them. The last chapter of the book is an appeal to the Arabs to pick up their own legacy, and it discusses the special characteristics of the Arabs, the reason why Allah Ta'ala chose to reveal the message in to the Arabs and in the Arabic language. And so Sayyid Abul Hasan Ali Nadwi urges them to lead the revolution which is required for the revival of Islam. So that ends the 8 chapters of the book. So now I will end this lecture with some concluding remarks so as to give some time for question and answers. So let us just discuss what we have covered so far. So the one question is, can Islamic teachings launch a revolution today? And the answer is yes, it can. Uh, the reason we are not doing so is because we do not know what the revolution of Islam was. And why don't we know it? Because our minds have been colonized. And so Muslims are looking to the West to create a revolution and revival instead of looking to the Quran. The message, the spirit of the original teachings have been lost. Muslims think that the message came to teach us how to make salat and how to make wuzu. And today the great battles are being fought about whether you should do masah on leather socks or cotton socks. And similarly, other matters like whether you should do rafa yadain or not, and other things. But the essential message, the heart of the message, the revolutionary aspects of the message are no longer under discussion. One of the main reasons for this has been the colonization of the globe, which has led to the conquest of our minds, and we are all enchanted by the West. And this is why we are not even looking in the right direction. So Iqbal says that my eyes were not dazzled by the brilliance of Western teaching because they were protected by the dust of Medina and Najaf. So this is the thing, that we need to protect our eyes from the apparent brilliance and dazzle of Western teaching. And basically, there are two uh, steps that we need to take. One is the jihad, which is in the internal, and this is called the effort of the night, to stay up in the nights to plead before Allah and to pray before Allah and to cry before Allah, for not for our personal needs, but for the whole ummah and for all of humanity which is lost. And then there is the external jihad, which is the effort of the day, in which we go and instead of working to increase our income and to pursue our pleasure, and these are the messages, and to look for happiness, the pursuit of happiness. Instead, we should say that, okay, I will get all my pleasure in Jannah. This life is dedicated to the mission of our Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And like he lived a difficult life, so we will choose to live a difficult life so that we can bring the blessings of this message to all of mankind. And so this requires jihad, the effort, and then it also requires ijtihad. How do we do this? What does the message of Islam mean for today? Again, this is something that requires rediscovery in every age. We know how Imam Abu Hanifa interpreted the message, and in every age, Islamic scholars have adapted the message to the needs of their time. Today, there is an urgent need to understand what Islam teaches us to do today. How do we counter the financial institutions of the West? How can we build genuine Islamic institutions? Nobody knows today. We are so in all institutions. How do we build political institutions which are not dependent on ideas from the West like democracy? How do we build economic institutions? How do we build social institutions? On all of these, Islamic tradition and Islamic heritage and Islamic teachings provide us great guidance, but we are all under the influence of the social science of the West, which is based on their own history. It is not based on knowledge. So this is one of the great deceptions of the West, that we are following their teachings in politics, economics, society, and we have forgotten the 1,000 years of learning of Islam, which give us guidance on this in these directions. Okay, so this is where I will stop, and I will stop this sharing of the screen, and I will give time for questions.
Yes, Doctor, thank you so much. You covered so much in such a short time. We have a number of questions and they'll keep on coming, but I have listed them down. So let's start from the first question. It was from Sobia Amin, and she was asking, Doctor, please enlighten us with the concept of waqf and musharika.
All right. So there is a technical aspect, but what I want to mention is the institutional aspect. You see, the West believes in accumulation of wealth, that you should gather money and you should store it and keep it for your own private and personal use. And so this is the spirit of Western teaching, that you should just keep accumulating wealth. So if somebody goes to the bank and says, I have $1 million, what should I do with it? The bank will teach him how to make it into $2 million. When the Prophet ﷺ, somebody took a lot of money that he had, I have a lot of excess money, what should I do with it? The Prophet ﷺ told him to create a waqf, so that he will give this money to the for benefit to all of mankind, and that this would last until the end of time. So the spirit of the waqf is that excess of wealth that we don't need. If I have $1 million, I can only use a little bit of that in my life. So what should I do with that? I should spend it on others who don't have money, and waqf is a means to do that. Today, this spirit has been lost, and once the spirit is there, then the institution will be come into function again.
Right. Thank you, Doctor. The other question was from Naveed Altaf, and he's referring to the thing that you mentioned, that West benefited from Muslims when uh, they translated the books. So his question is, why the West benefited from our treasure of books, but could not absorb the true message of Islam?
Yes, this is a good question, and it's a very good question. They were able to adapt the intellectual part, the scientific and technical, but they were not able. They were benefited to a certain extent by teachings of Islam. So that is what the Enlightenment Quran teaches us, how the Enlightenment thinkers benefited from the Quran. So many ideas like liberty, freedom for all, justice, the mottos of Rousseau and Voltaire, which created the French Revolution, these were all taken. So they did benefit, but not to the fullest extent, because without Iman, you cannot benefit from the full message of Islam. And so it is our failing in some sense in order to convey them the full message of Islam.
Okay, thank you, Dr. The next question, I think it was referring to the time you mentioned the philosophies that the West has come up, different philosophies. So the question is regarding that, and it asks, is this a deliberate action of the West to destroy the true spirit and essence of Islamic teachings and drag Muslims? Uh, uh,
No, I think that this is not true. The West does not, uh, the West is just pursuing their own historical trajectory. Although it is true that the Crusades created hostility to Islam, which persists to this day, and we can see it every day because of the so-called Islamic terrorism, where if one person kills 10 others, this is world news. But if one country bombs and destroys a complete country and millions of people are killed, this is not called terrorism. So the prejudice against Islam and the hatred for Islam, this is still in the hearts of Muslims, but they do not have enough understanding of Islamic philosophy to be able to actually counter it effectively. So it is our own failure to understand and implement the
right.
Islamic philosophy, which is the big source.
Right. The next question is, what do you mean by the spirit of the original teachings has been forgotten?
Well, you see, there are multiple dimensions of our existence. There is the personal dimension. Who am I? What should I live for? There is the family. There is the neighborhood. There is the community, and there is the economic dimension. How should we run our economics? How should we run our bazaars? In all of these, there are very strong, clear Islamic teachings, but in nowhere are they being followed. Our bazaars are like the capitalist bazaars. Our methods of finance are like the Jewish. Our social institutions are like the Christians, and our political institutions are borrowed from Europe. So, in all dimensions of our life, we are living following the teachings of Europe. In none of these dimensions are we following Islamic teachings. We are not even aware of these Islamic teachings for the most
Right.
part.
Okay. So I think I'll skip. No, no. This was the fifth question. In the last chapter, the author is urging Arabs to work for the revival of Islam. But what we are witnessing is the welcoming of globalization, opening of cinemas and casinos. What can be done in this regard?
This is something which is worth answering clearly. You must understand that Islamic history is not the history of kings and rulers. From the very beginning, and this is a big mistake which Muslims make, that they say that, some of our rulers were very cruel and very bad people, and Khilafat-e-Rashida ended at the after 30 years after the passing of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The history of Islam is the history of the ulama and the Sufia and the masses, and not the history of rulers and kings and politics. So, if we put our eyes focus on politics, then we will not understand even the revolution of Islam. If we look at how Islam lives in the hearts of the people, we can find it today everywhere. So that's so we should not be mistaken by what the rulers and the political parties and the powers are doing, because the powers are aligned with the interests of the global capital. But we should look at the hearts of the people to find Islam.
Right. Uh, so the next question is, uh, it's sort of a okay. I'll just uh, ask it. What do you think are the main reasons of failure of Islamic movements from last 200 years, including in recent times of Jamaat Islami, and Tanzim Islami?
This is a very good question and very important one. And actually, this we will be discussing this in later lecture about the different movements and how they have tried and how they have failed and what can be done to patch this up. So this requires an entire separate lecture.
Okay. So the question is okay. The next question is, uh, for rediscovering the appropriate economic system. Theoretically, many efforts have been in place, but practically the implementation is not only not found, but also combated on many levels by the current systems. So, what do you suggest?
Absolutely, this is a very good realization that, and in fact, this is also one of the later lectures, that there are domains which are contested, in which and there are domains which are not contested. So, if we are weak, then we should start by building institutions where there will be no one to oppose, and we should work on those areas first and gather strength before we work in areas where there will be opposition. So this is a part of strategy. Yes, definitely. From the beginning, jihad means that you're not working on empty ground. There are opposing forces, and so you have to think and plan, and you have to look at the strength of the opposition, and you have to look at your own strength, and then plan strategy according to this.
Thank you, Dr. Saab. There's another question. Please advise how we can overcome the following and idealism of Western values to come back to our Islamic path. Is this is the big issue for Muslims living overseas and also in Pakistan?
Yes, I think that definitely having become blinded by the dazzle of Western thought and science and technology is a very big issue. And that because we are so enchanted by the West, we cannot see the truth of our own teachings. In terms of Islamic economics, I can say safely that many of the leaders have found places where the Quran is in direct conflict with Samuelson, and in such situations they have accepted the wisdom of Samuelson over the wisdom of Quran. And this has happened in many different areas where Muslims have accepted Western teaching even when it is in direct conflict with the Quran, because we are so impressed by the West. So this is a problem. This is one of the difficulties that we need to overcome.
Right. Dr. Saab, the next question is from Dr. Nauman Haider, who's also associated with Think Tank Institute, and you've met him. The question is, I feel that the era of Muslim Salatin and Khilafah, due to the importance and implementation of Islamic law by the institution of ulama, was reflective of Islamic ideals. Colonialism displaced ulama from this guidance and societal leadership role, and has therefore created a leadership and legal vacuum and allowing incorporation of values that are alien to Islam. What needs to be done on the part of ulama and the people to counter this loss?
Yes, I think this is a very good question. And basically, some Jamaats think that are taking a top down approach, that we need to capture the Khilafah first and then everything will be right. And without the Khilafah, we can do nothing. So, this is, I think, a mistaken idea. The Khilafah will come much later. It's the wrong sequencing. And others are taking the bottom up approach. and that is more successful. But but I think that that is also not sufficient. That in fact the key to success is the ulama, the thought leadership is not there currently. And that is where the ijtihad is needed. How do we make Islam live in this world in the form of not just our personal lives, but in our families, in our communities, in our institutions? How do we launch Islamic economic institutions? How do we launch Islamic political institutions? How do we launch Islamic social institutions? Even the waqf, you see, this is just an idea, but currently in the Islamic civilization, the waqf was the source of social welfare. It was one third of the land in the Ottoman Empire was devoted to waqf. So the waqfs were financing education, health, widows, orphans. All social services were provided by the waqf. Today, we don't have any social services in Islam, because in Islamic countries, rather, even though this is one of the commandments of Allah, feeding of the poor, it is not being done because our institutions were destroyed, and we haven't been able to. And everybody is trying to implement the Western institutions to do these things, which are Western institutions are very different from our approach and our ideology and our philosophy. So that's all from my side. Can you hear me? Hello? I can't hear you.
I'm
You are
sorry, I
muted.
muted my mic. I'm so sorry.
Yes.
Okay. So the next question is regarding the creation of institutions that you were commenting on. Uh, Please, if you can guide us to how to build pure Islamic educational institutions.
Yes, I think this is the most central important question. How do we build Islamic educational institutions? Again, Islamic educational institutions are very different from, you see, we are just copying West and Western educational institutions. So the institutions, Islamic educational institutions, were the ones in which Imam Ghazali was trained. And in these, all of knowledge was taught together. There was no distinction between secular knowledge and worldly knowledge and religious knowledge. So our at madrasas in India and Pakistan also used to teach astronomy and mathematics and physics and all the things. So this separation, this idea of secular knowledge, this is one of the most problematic things. That the idea that there are domains of knowledge which are separate from religion, this idea first started in the West, and it was opposed by Christians, that no, there can be no knowledge which is outside the scope of Christianity. But ultimately, it became widely accepted, and now it is accepted by Muslims also. Muslims think that mathematics, physics, chemistry, biology, etc., these are outside the scope of religion. And this is a big mistake. Nothing is outside the scope of religion. And so, to create an Islamic education, we need to merge these apparently secular fields with the religious fields, and nobody knows how to do that today. And so this is the burning need of the time.
Right, and there's one question which directly asks the same, and it is: are the Islamic notions of Ummah, Adl, and Jihad reconcilable with the ideals of contemporary civilization of democracy, liberty, and secularism?
Absolutely not. These are very different, and the Western ideals have the appearance of attractiveness, but within them they are very deadly, and they cause enormous amounts of harm. I can give an example of that. There was this Persian philosopher who said that property should be Mazdak, I think was his name. He said that, this property is what causes inequality and wealth. So we should abandon the idea of property. Everything belongs to everybody. So this is the idea of communal property. This seems very attractive because, but what actually happened as a result of his this preaching of this philosophy was that the powerful people took over the property of the poor, saying that, well, all property belongs to everybody equally, so we are just. So instead of the poor benefiting by getting a share in the wealth of the rich, the opposite happened. The rich and the powerful used this philosophy to justify taking what little was owned by the poor. So, exactly like this, the Western philosophies have a very attractive appearance, but the reality is very bitter and very harmful. As we can see today, that capitalism is supposed to bring prosperity to the people, but actually it brings prosperity to 50 people who own more than half of the planetary wealth. So you are mute again, I think.
I'm sorry about that. We have a number of questions, but we are approaching the end. So I think we can take two more questions. Uh, right. So I think you touched upon this before, but the question is, what triggered the decline of Muslims after reaching such lofty heights of achievement in all walks of life?
Yes, this was a centuries long process which had many different factors involved, and you cannot put a date on it and you cannot put a particular event, but there were many contributing factors. So it's a complex, all civilizations. Allah Ta'ala says that uh, that um, that the all civilizations rise and fall. So this is part of um natural mechanisms that Ibn Khaldun studied. That so it's not surprising, but the reasons are too complex to go into here.
Okay, I think Dr. Saab, this one question which I cannot understand. Maybe you would be able to understand it. It asks, can you in a later session, inshallah, elaborate more on non-contested domains for the revival of an Islamic economic system?
Yes, that's fine. Ahmed Mabruk is raising his hand. I would like to ask what he wants
Uh,
to ask.
I don't see here raise of hands. Ahmed Mabruk Saab, if you can hear us, uh, I can unmute you. You can ask the question directly. Okay, please go ahead.
هو Assalamu alaikum, Professor. Actually, I didn't raise my hand, but I was following every single word you have said in the lecture, and my question have been covered by some of the
Alhamdulillah,
questions that
Alhamdulillah,
were already asked.
Alhamdulillah.
But
Very good.
inshallah, I will have more questions for the coming session, inshallah.
Jazakallah. Ahmed Mabruk is also a great philosopher. So,
Jazakumullah khair. I'm just learning from you. Thank you.
Right. So, Dr. Can we go back to the question about
yes, please.
non-contested domains for
Oh,
the
yes, the
revival?
non-contested. So basically, there are things we can do where no one will fight us. So if we build waqf to help the poor, nobody is going to fight us. But if we try to build political institutions and go for jihad with the West, then obviously there will be contest. So
Okay,
there are many areas where we can do things where nobody will be objecting. And there are areas which also Islam, like Khilafah, for example. Khilafah is, nobody would deny that we would like to have a Khalifa and that this is part of Islamic requirements. But if we say that, okay, let's set up a Khilafah first, we will immediately run into very strong resistance, both from internal political leaders and from external forces. So, until we have the strength to do that, this is a very contested domain. So, we should identify our strengths and weaknesses and work in the areas where we can do things without being opposed. After we build some strength, then we can go into those areas where there is more contest, more mujadala that needs to be done. So it's just
right,
a strategic question.
right. Thank you, Dr. Saab. I think we are it's 9 o'clock now, so we should end the session. And I don't see any other questions coming in. Just a small announcement. Uh, Dr. Saab has decided also now to do the same course in Urdu language. So, inshallah, we are planning to have the first class, which would be the same lesson, but Dr. Saab will conduct the class in Urdu language. So, we'll have it on Friday, coming Friday. And I think that's it. Dr. Saab, do you have any other uh, comment?
No, thank you. Assalamu alaikum to everybody, and thanks for listening. And I hope that this will be beneficial for the Ummah. May Allah Ta'ala make it
Ameen.
good for us. Jazakallah.
Thank you.
And,
Yes, there was a question. The class will be same time next Sunday, and the next lesson is mentioned on the site. Those who have not registered, I would request again to please go and register. Most of you, I think, have registered, so you can see the whole course line, course outline on the site, and it would help you to go through the pre-reading material also, which has been provided by Dr. Saab. Thank you so much. Thank you.